Thank you, Chairman Grassley. One can argue that the most ambitious and energetic and active agency of government is not an agency of government. DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, which I don't recall as part of our cabinet. But I believe that the courts have concluded that despite their protestations to the contrary, that DOGE is probably required to comply with FOIA. At least that's the status as we currently look at it. I worry about where this is headed if an agency with the power to eliminate federal agencies is not subject to FOIA. What is motivating these people? What activities are they engaged in? What disclosures should they make to the American public? Apparently, they don't believe there's anything they should disclose to the American public. Professor Coco, what's your opinion?
Thank you, Senator Durbin. There's, as you noted, the question about whether DOGE is subject to FOIA is currently in the courts. It's a long-standing doctrine under FOIA that agencies that exercise their own independent authorities under the government are subject to FOIA, whereas the president's closest advisors are not, and the president, of course, himself is not subject to FOIA, and instead subject to the Presidential Records Act. I have no reason to believe that the courts are not perfectly capable of applying that test faithfully in this instance as they have in the past. The preliminary ruling that you're referring to was preliminary, but does indicate that the district court that currently has the case that's furthest along does view DOGE as likely to be subject to FOIA's requirements. It looks like that case may be moving into a discovery phase, which will give us more information about what DOGE is doing and its role in order for the courts to make that determination. And at this point, I see no reason to believe that the courts are not capable of making that determination. As to why an agency or a government entity would prefer to exempt itself from transparency, I think over the history of governments, it has been shown that transparency is uncomfortable, and that there are lots of reasons why government entities try to avoid it. But I think it's important to remember that transparency requirements serve two functions. One is to let the public know what the government is doing and to uncover any sort of misconduct or abuse of power. And the other is to deter that abuse of power and misconduct. When government officials know that what they're doing will come to light, they are less likely to act improperly. And so I think the faithful application of FOIA in this case, like in every other case, is extremely important.
And of course, there's another way to foil FOIA, and that would be what's happening at the Department of Health and Human Services, where the newly minted Secretary, Robert Kennedy, just fired personnel charged with handling FOIA requests at the CDC and the Food and Drug Administration. He did this after stating, and I quote, "Public health agencies should be transparent. And if we want Americans to restore trust in public health agencies, we need transparency." Reportedly, FOIA staff at numerous other agencies have also been fired. So what is the practical impact when the FOIA agency within the agency is virtually empty when they open the door to the office? Dr. Epstein?
Thank you, Senator. Well, I think one thing is, and I don't know the specifics of those firings, but I think certainly those circumstances should increase the obligation to make proactive disclosures. I would say in my own experience, one of the things that was most surprising to me, both as a transparency advocate and in the executive branch, is the number of agencies that use outside consultants or contractors for the purpose of managing their cloud and doing searches for the purpose of disclosure. So it would seem to me that if you're removing staff and still bound by compliance requirements, you're going to have to find some ability to conduct searches and productions of documents, and that just may mean relying on contractors versus employees.
Unless the administration happens to believe that concealing this information is important enough to defy the law, correct?
I don't know the specifics of that, but often, I could say in my own experience, the amount of FOIA litigation and the processing requirements are a heavy burden for the agencies. And, you know, I worked in the executive branch for close to 4 years. I think every administration has a good faith goal of complying with FOIA. Often it's not the top priority for the White House, and it's generally managed by career civil servants. But there certainly are challenges with fully responding to these requests. They're massive and they take time.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Thank you.